We're taking the morning train to the hills in the heart of Sri Lanka. This journey is an old tradition from the days of the British Empire. Every year, as the tropical heat grew unbearable in Colombo, the British headed up this line in search of the healthier, cooler climate, 6,000 feet up in the hill country. From railway carriages like this one, they could watch the wonders of the local landscape, mountains, rocks, and waterfalls, and the lush green terraces of the tea plantations. As they climbed up and up, they noticed changes. Dry plains turned to fertile pastures. Flowers bloomed that would have withered on the coast. The turbulent weather of the tropics gave way to the soft, temperate breezes of an English summer. So what better place for me to take a cool look at mysteries from our world's far north?
The landmass of the old Soviet Union made up 1/6 of the surface of the Earth. For years, eminent biologist Valentin Sapunov has been travelling to its remotest corners on the track of the elusive Russian wild man. He's searching for any traces of the ape-like creature's presence.
This tree is very interesting. As far as I know, there is no one animal in this region that is able to make such a damage for the tree. I think that wild man looked for insects. It's a very typical food. I am not sure that it is the result of action of wild man, but maybe it is so, maybe.
After each expedition, Sapunov returns to his base in St. Petersburg. His travels have yielded weird and tantalizing trophies.
This is footprint that we detected of wild man. Studying footprints of wild man, we may suggest many ideas about its image, about its biological construction, and according to our data, it has weight from 200 to 300 kilograms and height from 2 to 3 meters. This piece of tree was cut by me and my friends near the St. Petersburg in forest of Karelian Isthmus, and as far as we understand, this tree was marked by wild man. You may see the horizontal line that were made by somebody having a strong fingernails.
But Sapunov claims the only creature known to science that could have made such marks is a gorilla.
As far as we know, there is no gorilla in Leningrad district. That's why I am sure that this tree was damaged by wild man.
This hair is said to come from a wild man. From evidence like this, Sapunov has made models of what he thinks a wild man couple looks like. Through detailed examination of the wild man's footprints, Sapunov has worked out how he walks. He thinks the creature normally travels on 2 legs and moves at about 10 kilometers per hour. But he says it's capable of an alarming 70 kilometers per hour. Professor Sapunov has built up his picture of the wild man from interviews with the lucky few who claim to have seen it. Igor Radimov was a medical officer at a now deserted army base in the forests outside St. Petersburg. While the base was active, the soldiers reported frequent sightings of the wild man. It was even known to peer in through the windows of the barracks. Radimov believes the stories because he too had an unnerving encounter.
Well, the first thing we saw was his huge shadow. As he came closer to the light, his front was sort of lit up, illuminated. Because of this, we could make out that he was covered with light grey fur. It was rather glittery. The soldiers said they'd noticed the palms of his hands were dark, and he had some dark stripes on his belly. I was reminded of his screams when I visited the zoo with my daughter. I heard sounds coming from the monkey house where the baboons and orang-utans are kept. They were the same as our wild man made.
A metro station in St. Petersburg is the starting point for Sapunov's latest forensic foray. Olga Satchisova is convinced that she met the wild man in the forests outside the city. She is taking Sapunov to show him where it happened.
Now, Valentin Borisovich, we're coming close to the place where I met the wild man. I'll show you precisely. I'll put you exactly on the spot where he stood. Valentin Borisovich, now we're almost standing on that place. Yes, not almost. He was standing there where you're standing now. This creature was about 3 meters tall. It had very beautiful fur, which looked a bit like a bear's fur, but was very thick. It was shining with gold and was well combed. His head was rectangular shaped, looking very similar to a bucket. Valentin Borisovich, here is something I did at home. Perhaps it will help you to imagine what I saw. His eyes were a reddish color. He had almost no neck, massive shoulders. I could feel that he was frightened of me, and I was scared of him.
But Sapunov's determination overcomes all fears. However long it takes to catch a glimpse of his mysterious quarry, his need to find the truth for science burns on. Greenland is one of the most inhospitable countries in the world. Lying on the Arctic Circle, it is covered in ice except for the coastal edges, which can support crops only in the short Arctic summer. It was here that in the Middle Ages Viking explorers landed and settled. At their peak, the 2 colonies had 4,000 people, 16 churches, 2 monasteries and their own bishop. They farmed the land, and for 500 years the communities thrived. But suddenly, at the end of the 14th century, the colonists disappeared. Today, the only evidence of their existence is the stones of the deserted houses, alongside mass graves of some of those who lived there. In Copenhagen, Denmark, forensic anthropologist Niels Linderup has examined more than 450 Norse skeletons from Greenland. The evidence he has found suggests that they had been forced to abandon their usual food supply.
We surveyed all the Norse material, and evidence for a diet change can perhaps be found in these very strange bony growths which we find in the jaws of the Norse, especially from the later settlement period. And according to some new interesting research, these bony growths could be caused by a predominantly marine diet. That is, they lived more and more of fish and sea mammals.
The evidence suggests the settlers could not make a living from the land. Other parts of the skulls told Linderup that their health was declining. He found more and more instances of middle ear disease.
We tried to compare the results from the early settlement period with the results from the late settlement period, and this seemed to indicate an increase in the frequency of middle ear disease in the late settlement period. And this could perhaps point to a general decline in health conditions. I think we're looking at a reversal of the colonization situation. In the 15th century, we know that Iceland and also Norway was hit by the plague, which left a lot of land available. And probably this tempted a lot of the Norse in Greenland to move back to Iceland or Norway.
Linnerup's results speak of an increasingly intolerable life in these Spartan homesteads, but they do not explain the complete disappearance of the colonists. Archaeologists searching for clues have turned to every discipline of science. From beneath the buildings, they have taken soil samples for analysis. The Vikings covered their floors with layers of straw, which became deeper every year. From one of the last inhabited farmhouses, samples have been taken from different levels. Entomologist Peter Skidmore studied flies taken from the floor. He found the unhatched pupa of one called Telomerina.
There was no way this could have survived in Greenland without human assistance. It would occur in areas where there were huge concentrations of human or dog excrement. It breeds also in the darkest sort of environments. It won't breed in light conditions. So what it's telling us about the actual environment is that it was nice and warm, a bit smelly, but cosy.
Skidmore then turned to the flies taken from the top layer of the floor.
The next sample that was taken from the bedroom indicated a stark change. Telomerina virtually disappeared. Its place was taken by another fly, Scoliocentra. It would indicate not so much excrement as actual decaying corpses, possibly human. So, briefly, the bottom level is nice and cosy bedroom. The top level, something terrible has happened. The temperature's dropped. And this fly, a carrion feeder, corpse feeder, is taken over.
Skidmore concludes that the Norse died in their beds.
Well, Mark, you ready to go in the freezer again today? Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Scientists agree that living conditions in Greenland worsened dramatically.
It certainly is pretty warm.
Glaciologist Paul Majewski believes that he knows exactly what happened. In the heat of the New Hampshire summer, he spends his working day at temperatures of minus 15 degrees in a giant refrigerator in the university car park. These tubes contain ice cores collected from all over the world. They have recorded almost every change in the planet's climate. Majewski's team have taken specific cores from Greenland. Working in the most inhospitable conditions, the drill penetrates nearly 2 miles into the ice cap and brings to the surface a tube of frozen history. Encased in the cores are particles from the air of ancient times that speak volumes to science. The expert eye can detect faint layers in the cores. Each one represents a single year's snowfall, so every piece of ice can be precisely dated.
By doing a series of analysis, we can describe the environment at that time. For example, we know by looking at the oxygen isotopes for that period of time that conditions were considerably colder than they had been in the previous decades. We know that the sea ice extent, number 2, was much greater than it had been in previous decades, and we can verify this with our measurements of chloride.
So detailed is the analysis that even tiny particles of potassium were detected. Majewski knows these could only have come from around the Himalayan mountains, so the icy Arctic winds had swept much further south than before.
The cold air mass that normally sits over the high Arctic was significantly moved farther southward, plummeting much of the northern hemisphere into colder conditions throughout the year than it would have been in the previous decades. Immediately following, within the next several years, the climate began to get milder again, and it stayed milder for about 50 to 70 years. Suddenly, however, around AD 1400 to 1410, conditions became significantly colder, and this part of the northern hemisphere plummeted into one of the coldest periods that it had experienced over the last 12,000 years.
The timing of these cold spells corresponds with the years when the 2 Norse settlements in Greenland disappeared. Majewski believes they were frozen out of existence.
It's highly probable that the Norse settlers would have no longer been able to till their fields. They probably wouldn't have been able to go into the ocean to fish. But chances are, because they were never seen again, they did die in the cold period that finally marked the beginning of the Little Ice Age.
Even at its best, life in Greenland must have been grim. Niels Linnerup wonders if there's another intriguing puzzle.
Well, I think the main question about the Norse is not why did the Norse disappear from Greenland? It's rather how did the Norse manage to stay on in Greenland for 500 years?
I wonder if the disappearance of those colonies is the earliest case of an advertising campaign going wrong. As we've seen, Greenland is an icy, bleak, and inhospitable place. Legend has it that it was given its name to make it sound more attractive. Perhaps the Norse settlers woke up one day and realized they'd been conned.
The sun rises late over Lake Storsjön in Sweden. Its waters are bitterly cold even in summer and many meters deep. The lake is said to harbour a massive monster unknown to science. Ole Mattsson collects eyewitness reports. Garda Persson recalls walking by the lake with his girlfriend.
Then she suddenly screams, "The big monster." So then I look down and about 10 or 15 meters away from me, I can see this long monster swimming towards the shore. The size of the monster? About 5 to 6 meters. The first time you see the monster, you get a little shock. You start shaking. We followed the monster along the shore and we ran up a hill so we could see where it was going all the time. It followed the shore and then by the jetty it turned and went back out into the lake. We could see it come up and we could see 3 humps as well. It lasted about 20 minutes. And we could see the monster all the time. I know what I've seen, and nothing can convince me otherwise anyway. I believed it before, but now I'm completely sure. There is something down there.
The town of Östersund sits right on the lake's edge. Ole Mattsson is curator of the local museum. He has discovered that reports of the lake monster date back for centuries. There is even one on this ancient runestone.
The runestone is about 800-900 years old. And here you can see the monster. Here are the eye and the head of the monster. And here the snake or the monster goes around the stone and to the tail. And he has a tail in his mouth.
The runes say that when they are interpreted, the monster will appear in the lake. They were first understood in the 16th century, and there have been reports of the monster ever since. Stig Nielsen and his wife saw what looked like 3 car wheels in the water when they were driving over a bridge across the lake.
We saw it about a half minute. It looked like 3 car wheels was rolling after one from us. It was about 100 meters from the bridge and about 30 meters from the shore. Both my wife and I was sure that it must be the lake monster. What else?
Ole Mattsson knows of hundreds of sightings such as this. Each one is shown by a dot on this map of the lake. There are photographs which appear to show an enormous creature in the water. A fishing boat recorded a huge underwater shape with its sonar equipment. People thought it must be the monster.
Each one of the evidence is not so convincing, but the evidence together is that will show that there are something in the lake.
Danish zoologist Lars Thomas began his studies of the Storchen monster, hoping to believe in it. One famous report came from two girls who were frightened into a tree by a monster they said had huge bat-like ears.
There's been about 30 sightings where people have described the ears, have compared them to kind of very big white bat wings. And that sounded very strange to me because most other lake monsters haven't got any ears at all. In my mind, this points to the fact that the Storchen monster is in fact sightings of moose. Not many people realize that moose are excellent swimmers. The two moose behind me have actually, they're Swedish moose. They have swam across from Sweden to Denmark. And at the narrowest place, there's 5 kilometers of sea with a very strong current. And that takes a very strong swimmer to cross that. But this one did. I think that the big whitish ears of the monster is in fact this, the antlers of the moose. Because when you see, they're white, they have spikes all along the edges, and they could look like very big whitish bat wings. The fact that the Storchen monster has ears looking like this, and the Storchen is located in an area of Sweden with a very big population of moose, makes it, in my mind, very likely that the Storchen monster is in fact swimming moose.
Lars Thomas' theory may well explain at least some of the sightings on the lake's surface, but there has been at least one underwater meeting. Carl Arne Carlsen ran a commercial diving firm. He was deep in Lake Storchen making repairs to a water pipe when he came face to face with a huge creature over 3 meters long. He describes it as having a hook on its head and a long tongue which seemed to flick in and out as it breathed.
I'm very sure about what I saw. He had a hook and like a snake tongue, and I think he's breathing, and the snake tongue move.
Carl Arne has told fish experts of his meeting. He says that none of them could tell him of any creature that big that could live in such deep and cold waters.
Before I see the great monster, I don't believe it. But now, after I believe it's some mystery in the lake.
After all my years of studying the monster, I believe it's something in the lake we don't understand what it is, but I know there are something in the lake we can't explain. It's a mystery.
These northern mysteries, like all the others in our series, will continue to make me wonder, but nothing could induce me to go and investigate them in person. After 40 years in the heat of Colombo, I'm even finding the hill country uncomfortably cold. So I'll settle for mysteries I can investigate in the sunshine. Then they can send shivers of enjoyment down my spine and not shivers of cold.